Hey, John Morris here. I'm the lead instructor for the Wishlist Member Certified Developers Program and the CEO here at johnmorrisonline.com. And in this video, we're going to talk about the combo layout. And we're going to cover the practical exercise for building this kind of a website. So you'll notice here this looks a lot like what we did in our the approach video that talks about the kind of conceptual overview of the combo layout. The main difference here is that we've actually gone through and set up our navigation over here, how how a lot of people are doing this, how I envision it being done, so forth. Over here is kind of our content area. This would be kind of your main content area. This you could kind of do whatever you want to with. That would be based off of some of the things that we've already talked about. You could have columns inside of here. You could kind of manage this content area however you wanted. But the main thing, the main kind of piece of functionality, the main thing that makes this layout different is this navigation area. And so what we've done here is, if you notice, I go ahead and minimize this and I bring this over, we'll reach a point where this kind of clicks over into just showing the icons here. Okay, and so you can see that kind of layout, at least to me, I think it's pretty slick. Works pretty well. You can maybe adjust this so at this size maybe these shrink a little bit smaller if you wanted to. I don't think it's 100% necessary. You can maybe target this to change to this type of setup at a wider width. Right now it's 768 pixels. You can maybe target that at something a little higher, maybe the 980 or something along those lines. But again, I think this is a pretty slick layout. I think this is the way a lot of websites are going to go, because this works well both on large screens and small screens, especially because over on this side, over in the content area, you can kind of do whatever you want to do and make this still responsive like you would if it were full width, but now you have a navigation that works well on a mobile device and has more of a top to bottom type setup. So again, I think this is the way a lot of sites are going to go, start to look more like applications in this sense. So we're going to cover what that looks like now. An example of someone who is heading towards this kind of layout is actually Facebook. If you haven't seen their new design, it's not necessarily rolled out to everybody yet, and it's been rolling out pretty slow as far as I can tell, but this is kind of what they're heading towards. And you'll notice it's the same kind of look with all your navigation buttons over to the left hand side here, and then you have your main content area here. And then you notice inside here they're actually doing columns, so you have your main kind of newsfeed column here, and then over here you'll have a second column that has some of your supplementary information. Obviously they'll run ads over here and so forth. So again, this is an example of how you might tweak this kind of combo layout to fit what it is that you're building for your site, a client, or whatever the case may be. Right, so again, I think this is what we're going to see a lot of things going to. So let's go ahead and dive into the code and take a look at how to actually do this. So we'll bring up our code here, and we'll start out by we'll close that. We'll start out by just taking a look at the HTML. Again, I've kind of covered this head tag in detail now, and this will be the third video. But this is essentially just showing you an example of how you might organize your head tag. This has all the standard stuff: your chart, your character set, your title, your viewport, which pretty much is required for anything responsive, description, the author, your open graph tags. Here we're including some custom fonts. Here we're including the icon font, which we use in the navigation. Here we're including our style sheet. This is really the only thing that changes in the head tags between all these practical exercises. And then here's including jQuery. Again, we don't use it, but this is again an example of how you might organize your head tag. All right, if we come down here, you notice that this will look a lot like the liquid layout setup, in the sense that we have our fluid span here, we have an inner, and then we have all pretty much the same content in here. The difference is that now we've added this span 3, and we've created our navigation over here. Just like I talked about in the approach video, how we did this. This is the exact same setup. The only difference is inside of it I created an unordered list, and created a bunch of list items to create our navigation. Okay, so this works the same way that we talked about in the approach video. Again, we have our HTML5 reset, and then we get down in here to our structure. We have our body tag. Actually, I can get rid of this. I don't know, I'll leave that because I think I need some of that but the reset does most of this, but I think I do need some of that for our combo layout, so I'll just leave it. But here we have our span 3. Again, it's positioned absolute top, bottom, left, so that it's positioned to the top, stretches all the way to the bottom, and it's all the way to the left. That's what keeps it basically over here on the left, is that positioning. It's a width of 300 pixels, height 100%, again, helps stretch it to the top. And overflow is hidden. That's to disable scroll bars. Now, if you have a lot of navigation items in here where you would need to enable scroll bars for maybe smaller screens and so forth, then that might be something that you, instead of using the overflow hidden, you can see it says set to scroll here to enable. So you can actually enable those by setting this to scroll if you needed them for whatever reason. Now, again, that may not be the prettiest thing, but you could also use CSS and or jQuery JavaScript to style those scroll bars. Pretty sure Facebook does something along those lines for its scroll bars and so forth, to make them look prettier if you needed them. So here we have a small navigation, so we don't really need to worry about that. Then for our fluid, again, it's position fixed, top is 0. The left is 300 to basically move it out of the way of our span 3, our navigation. Bottom to stretch all the way top to bottom. Overflows auto, so it can scroll. And then of course we set the background color to white. Alright, so that's what gives us our layout, our left-right layout here. We kind of have already covered this in the approach video, but I'm just going through it again so you can see it again. Here we have our inner, so if we come over here, both of our spans have an inner applied to them. That's so that you can add padding and margin and so forth to this inner div without messing up what's going on inside the span and the fluid. So you're not messing up the actual combo layout with the navigation on the left and so forth. So you can style this inner tag pretty much however you want. Here in the span 3, which is our navigation bar on the left side, I'm setting the margin to 0. So this margin is actually only going to be applied to the content area. That's so that when we come over here and we roll over these and we're getting this hover effect, it's going all the way across. If I had some sort of margin on here, then there would be a gap essentially. So that just makes it look a little bit better. It's not necessarily essential for functionality, but it makes it look a little bit better for this hover effect. Okay. Again, these are the same IE6 hacks that we used in the approach video to help make this work on IE6. All right. Our typography is exactly the same as it's been. Fluid grid, liquid layout, and now here this is all the exact same typography. Cover how to do this in the individual responsive typesetting skill video. So if you're not familiar, if you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that. Here is kind of the main area where this changes. Here we're working with our navigation bar on the left side in order to make it look the way it does. Okay, so this is the main thing that we're going to cover here. So we've given our unordered list a class of nav primary and nav icons, and actually I could get rid of the nav icons because I didn't use it. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. So we've given it a class of nav primary, and then for each list item we've given it a class that matches what it is. So home, about, settings, and support. Okay, so we give it a class so that if we want to reuse this somewhere on the page we could, although I'm not sure that you would, but again, you could if you wanted to. And then we've named them so that we can change the icon. Okay, so if we go through this, we have our unordered list of named nav primary with the class nav primary, margin 0, batting 0, list style type none. That's basically a reset that makes it so that the default bullet styling is gone. Then I'll come back to the border bottom and border top because it won't make sense yet. Then on our list item, our anchor tag, this is where we're applying the styling that makes this. We covered this in the fluid grid about how to make a when we were creating our ordered list and using the check marks in order to use our icon font with our unordered list. This is the same thing that we're actually doing here. Okay, so but there are a few subtle differences. So we're setting the display to block so that it stretches 100% width of its container. That's mainly again for the hover effect, so that when it's hovered, that stretches all the way. If you don't set that, then it'll only to display block, this anchor tag will only go as far as the text goes, and it won't include any of the padding or anything like that. So this hover effect basically wouldn't work. Right, so display block, the line height is 1.5 rem. Again, that's based off of the default font size for this page, which for most browsers is 16 pixels. So we're setting this to about 24 pixels. That essentially matches the font size. Okay, so we did that a little bit differently here, so we got a little bit better match between the icons and the text, so that it didn't look. If you don't do that, then it lines the text more towards the bottom. So this just looks a little bit better in terms of how it shows up. Okay, so that's why we did that. All right, next is the padding. So we're adding a padding around this, 1 rem, 1 rem, 1 rem. This is all just basically generic padding. That's what creates the padding in this kind of space here. From, if you notice the little lines that separate this between the icon and the text and the lines, that's the padding. Okay. The one thing that's unique here is that you'll notice the left is 3 rem. Now, in the fluid grid video, it was 2, and all these others were set to 0, except for I think the bottom padding was set to 0.5. The reason this is 3 instead of 2 is because we're setting all of these other ones to 1, and then we need 2 rem to account for our icon. If you come down here and look at our icon, it's 2 rem, and we're doing a margin left of 2 rem. So we need to account for that. So we basically add that 2 rem to here. That's the same thing we did in the fluid grid video. It was just different numbers. It was this. I think these were. Well, I don't remember off the top of the head exactly what these were, but I think they were 1.5. So we were putting 1.5 here, and this was all set to 0. But basically, what you do is you take whatever your font size is. That's going to be what your margin left is, but negative, and then you're going to take that and you're going to add it to whatever padding you're creating for everything else here. So 2 rem plus 1 rem, that's how we get our 3 rem. All right, and that again is what makes it so that we have the same amount of padding to the left of this icon as we have over to the right. If we look at this, the green space, you'll notice that top, bottom, right, left, left it's not, but it's if you include the icon, if you could make that go around the icon, it's the same. So you get the same padding all the way around, but you account for the icon here. Okay, so that's essentially what we're doing. The font size, this could really be whatever you wanted it to be here. It's 1.5 rem. We got rid of the text decoration. And then this border bottom and this border top are what create this separating line here. Okay, so in order to create a separating line like that, what you need to do is you need to have the border bottom be a color that's darker than your background color, and your border top be a color that is lighter than your background color. That's what creates this effect. Now, it's best to keep it subtle. So if you look at the background color for this, well, it's actually down here. The background color is 282828. If we look at our border bottom, well, our border bottom is 2323, and this is 2D 2D 2D. Right? The difference between these colors is very subtle, but it's enough that it creates that effect. But it's not so much that it looks fake. Okay, if you do too much of a contrast between your background color and the line colors that you select for your borders, then it'll start to look fake. Okay, so you want a really subtle color. In my color picker, I barely moved it to get that difference in colors. Okay, and you can look up the difference between 2828 and 2323 and see what it is. It's very subtle. Right, then we set the color of our anchor tag to white, so that makes everything white, as you saw. And then we do a standard, this is a hover effect where we set the background to a lighter color. Usually, if you're going to do a lighter color, it's best to set it to the same color as whatever your light border is, so that when you hover it, it kind of makes it, you notice how it kind of makes it stand out just a little bit. Because it's matching the border, so it makes it kind of almost feel like the button is depressed because that border disappears. Okay, if that border is still there, it doesn't quite feel that way. All right, so again, usually you match your hover color to the lighter version of your border color that you're using here. That's also why we do our border bottom and our border top up here. You notice that it's the inverse of what's down here. So our border bottom here is 2D, 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 and our border top up here is 2323. That's the opposite of what we have here. This is on the overall unordered list. So that's only going to add a border to the top of this, or to the top of this unordered list, and all the way down here at the bottom. The reason we do that is because if we don't, you notice how on this very bottom down here we have the lighter color on the bottom, which retains the effect like all of the other list items. If we don't add that here, then we lose that effect. Okay, and we do it on the top for the same reasons, although because it's right up against the browser window, you can't really see it that well, but it is there. So it just gives us some consistency in terms of the design. All right, so that's what all of that is. Now here's where we get into the icon. Again, we covered this in the Fluid Grid video. This is all pretty much the same except for the actual numbers that we used. Okay, so we're using the Font Awesome font family. The font size went from 1.5 to 2 rem. I just thought it looked better. Our default content is the check mark. You could actually make this whatever you wanted to. You probably wouldn't want to use the check mark, but you could use the default icon if you haven't specified a custom one down here to whatever you want. I just left it as check mark. Again, display inline block. Margin left is -2 rem. That gives us our space for our icon. The width I set to 2.5 rem, and the reason is, if we come back over here, you'll notice when I hover this, you can see that there's some space between the icon and the text. Setting that width a little bit more than the size of the text is what creates that space. If I set this to 2, like that, then the text will be pretty much right up against the icon, like that, and that doesn't look so good. Okay, so that's why the width is just a little bit more, so that we can get some space between the icon and the text, and it looks better. All right, then the main thing that we're doing here, again, in our HTML, we gave our list items for each item different classes, so we know we can then specify a different icon. So you notice that we have UR nav primary LI A before. Here we have LI home A before, and all we're doing is changing the content of each one. So LI about, LI settings, LI support. This content is what determines what icon is being used, and that comes just straight from Font Awesome. When you go to their site, look at their icons, you click on one, it'll give you the Unicode version to use for the icon, and that's what you put in here. You have to add the slash in front of it, but that's what you put in here. Okay, so all this is doing is changing that content, which changes the icon. So that's how we end up with the different icons for each of the different menu items. Okay, so that makes essentially what this does is it makes it so that we can come in here and change the styling for the menu as a whole, and it will be applied to all of the list items regardless of what icon they have. We're only overriding the content for the icon, and there's no other styling that's applied. That means it's going to inherit all of the styling from all of this up here that we've done. And that's what we want, so that we can come in here and change this and mess with this, and it doesn't matter what icon is there. It's still going to change all of them. They're all going to look uniform. Okay, so that's the main piece of what we did here to make this look the way it does. The only other thing that we've done is that down here in our responsive area, just like we did in the fluid grid video, how we changed the width of our span 3 and the left setting, the left positioning of our span fluid to, in that video we set it to 100. Here we set it to 64 pixels because that is what essentially we need to make those icons fit in there nice and centered. 100 pixels is a little bit too wide. Okay, so that's what creates this effect, is those media queries that we are looking at right here. These media queries do that. Now you notice that the text disappears. This is what makes the text disappear. If we come over here, you notice that we have our anchor tag, and then inside of it all the text is wrapped in a span. That essentially lets us differentiate between our anchor or our icon and our text, so that we can hide our text once we get to a certain size, because it's just not going to fit. Okay, so that's what makes that effect happen, is that media query where we're hiding that span that the text is contained inside of. Okay, so again, I think that's a pretty sweet layout. The rest of this this styling in here is just stuff that I thought looked better. The span 3 I set to a background of 2828. That's the menu, and the color to F7. You could obviously change these colors to whatever you want. Facebook has the blue and white. And then the site title, which is this title up here. I got rid of the margin on top just because otherwise it pushes it down pretty far and it looked kind of funny. Obviously, you would come in here and style this however you want for your particular site or your particular setup. All right, so that is how to do the combo layout. That's how to get this all-important effect for this approach of these icons showing up over on the left, and this working how it does here. So again, this is something that would work really well for your website and allow it to work across, have a really similar display across mobile devices and larger screens and so forth, and work in a lot of different ways and still keep a really similar design that works well. And again, I think a lot of sites are going to go this way. You know, I know I'm definitely working on some stuff along these lines for what I'm doing. So again, I think that's what we'll see going forward. All right, so that is the combo layout practical exercise. That is all of the ins and outs, things to pay attention to, how to set it up, and so forth. So hopefully I found that helpful, and I'll talk to you later.
Hey guys, John here. So the biggest question I always get when I do these courses is, where can I get access to the source code? So I obviously can't upload that here on YouTube. So I've made that available for you over on BitTorrent. And along with the source code, you'll also be able to actually download the videos to your computer so you can have them forever. So if for some reason something crazy happened and I decided to delete them, or YouTube kicked me off of their site or whatever, it wouldn't really matter for you because you would have all the source code, you'd have all the videos, everything essentially that I've created for the course you would have on your own computer. So I've created a link in the description where you can find that stuff over on BitTorrent. Please consider going over there, supporting me that way. I'd appreciate that. Also, please consider making a donation here on YouTube using the fan funding. This is how, or one of the ways that I'm able to keep all of the videos that I'm doing and releasing here on YouTube for free, by those who are able to pitching in and allowing me to do that. So please consider that. And if you need access to any of the resources that I use through everything that I do online, coding, releasing videos, etc., you can head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/resources, and I have a whole slew of all sorts of different resources, from hosting to different tutorials and just everything over there that I use. So again, johnmorrisonline.com/resources.